Hi, I'm Dr. Charlene Walters, author, business and branding mentor, trainer, as well as your host for Launch, a business talk show for anyone who wants to launch their business, their career, or their life. Hi everyone, welcome to Launch. I'm Charlene Walters, your host, and today we have a super special guest, Andrea Owen. She's a best-selling author, she's a speaker, and a life coach. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you, Charlene. I'm excited to be here.
I am so happy you're here. I've enjoyed learning more about you, but can you tell the audience more?
Yeah, so I've been a life coach for, gosh, how many years has it been? 13. I've kind of lost count. Like once you get past 10, it's like it's all the same. I was formerly in the fitness industry and in the fashion merchandising industry. I'm one of those people who's had several different careers. This one is seeming to stick. I've written 3 books, and I'm also a mom and a dog mom, and used to play roller derby under the derby name Veronica Vane. So I've had quite a resume.
That is quite the resume. Good for you.
It's eclectic.
It is. I've kind of done the same thing. You know, the more you add, the more interesting you are, and we like interesting around here, so that's
It's
awesome.
great for conversations. Yeah,
It
that's
sure
true.
is. It sure is. You talk a lot in your books and in your speaking about self-confidence. And I know that's really hard for a lot of people. A lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome. They have a hard time getting going. Can you give some tips on what people can do to improve their confidence?
Yeah, so I work primarily with women, and it seems to be, there's research that shows that women primarily struggle with imposter complex and self-confidence issues. This is not to say that men and people of other genders don't struggle with it, but it tends to be more predominant within groups of women.
Yes.
And I love science. There's a little bit of science that tells us that some people are born with it. There's some studies that have been done in monkeys, and they're not sure how much that carries over into
Oh boy.
people, and how there are some monkeys that seem to have it in their DNA,
Interesting.
just being more self-assured. It is so fascinating.
It
But
really
I
is.
I break it I break it down into really 3 things, and they're sort of meta, if you will. And it's action and experiences. So any person who teaches self-confidence will tell you that we gain self-confidence through taking action, that
Yeah.
don't wait until you have the self-confidence. It's not how it works.
Yes.
So it's through actions and experiences. It's also through competency and mastery. So that's actually learning and being really good at what it is that you do, and learning to master a certain skill. And then the last one, and this is specifically for women, is to unlearn old conditioning and socialization that we have received since we were little. And that's what my last book that's coming out soon is really focused on, is that unlearning and unpacking our conditioning so we can really step into who it is that we want to be.
Amazing. And definitely the more you take action, the more confident you get. Can you talk a little more about some of those limiting beliefs that we've been brought up with in our culture? I know we're taught many things, not to brag, not to boast, to be a certain way. Can you unpack that a bit more?
Yeah. So, and this is a sweeping generalization, and there's always nuance. I did some research within my community, and there are some women who were specifically taught about self-assurance, and that it's okay to talk about your accomplishments, et cetera. But for the most part, girls and women are taught that we are more valued if we are selfless, if we are accommodating, if we prioritize other people's needs before our own, if we do our best to make everyone comfortable, all of that at the expense of speaking up for our own needs, at the expense of taking up space, at the expense of, even causing a stir and causing a scene in some instances where that scene is warranted. I'm not saying, we should all just go run amok and be obnoxious and like, no, and opportunistic. Like that's not what I'm saying. But for many people, it feels like that because
Yeah.
we're so used to being a certain way. And for some women, maybe even many women, acting like that and behaving a certain way is based on our survival, really.
It's really interesting, because I know as a woman, sometimes when I've really stood up for myself and sort of gone against what everybody else wanted, then I felt guilty about it, afterwards.
Right.
Like, I shouldn't have done that. Should I have done that? I second guess myself. So I think it's important to talk about these things. And speaking of that, what are some things we can do to help get rid of and let go of those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, it's, to be honest with you, I don't know if we ever completely let them go. Like, I want to start that like as our baseline, because it's not completely binary. What I have found in my own personal experience and talking to many successful women as well as working with clients, it's a lifelong it's a lifelong sort of, not just journey. I want to be more specific than that. It's lifelong learning, really, that we're
Right,
sort of like, it's like a bit of a push pull. And what I mean specifically by that is you might get past a certain limiting belief. Maybe you're working on your money blocks and you
right,
work past the belief that you shouldn't charge more than X amount for your services. And you're feeling really great and you're sort of up leveling your life and your career. And then you come up against another one, another limiting belief. And then maybe later on, you might come up with another money limiting belief. So I don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong when they
right.
encounter another limiting belief. It's lifelong, my sweets. And so it's the first part is you have to know what they are. Like, I know
Right.
it seems very obvious, but I think some people don't know where to start. So I'll start, limiting beliefs 101. You have to know exactly what they are. I invite people to think about the things that scare them the most. Is it hard conversations? Is it making more money? Is it, in your romantic relationship, something going on there? So what are the beliefs? And oftentimes these are unconscious. So it might take some digging, some journaling, some really thinking about things.
Yeah.
And then from there, I always encourage people just to be really neutral about it. I call it the ultimate ass kicker when
I
we
like
beat
that name.
ourselves up. We
Yeah.
beat ourselves up for beating ourselves up. And
Yeah.
we get to this place of consciousness and we're like, "Oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. Where do I even start? I'm never going to get to where I want to be." That type of self-talk. So just, it is what it is. Now, that is really great news. And where are we going to go from here? So just be in that neutrality. And if you can, lots and lots of self compassion, because it will help you get farther ahead. I promise you, no one beats themselves up into betterment. No one kicks their own ass and and it feels like love. It's not how it works.
I
So that's sort of like the basics to lay the foundation to start on your limiting beliefs.
Definitely. And I think we are our own worst critics. We kind of berate ourselves unnecessarily. And something that I see a lot with women and those entrepreneurs that I work with is they want to be perfect. They have this need to go out there and be perfect before they put themselves out there. And that's not how it goes. You've got to take action, as you said before. What are some ways that we can get over that need to be perfect?
You know, that's also one of those things where I have been doing this long enough to know that for some people, it is their personality just to take action very quickly. I am one of those people. I have a high risk tolerance.
Yeah.
And please believe me when I tell you, it has definitely gotten me in trouble. So I tend to be the type who takes action very quickly and I learn in retrospect.
Yeah.
Where people who really struggle with perfectionism don't have much of a tolerance for risk. So they want everything calculated. They want sort of an itinerary of how it's going to go because they want to learn prospectively. They want to learn before things get started. And unfortunately, that's extremely difficult. So that's not to say you're screwed if that's your personality. One of the best pieces of advice, and you don't need to hire someone to do this. You can have this be like a peer-to-peer thing, is to get some accountability.
Yeah.
Get some accountability, whether it's in some kind of meetup group, whether you hire a coach or even some therapists do it. There are apps that you can do where you can do this virtually. I always encourage, especially entrepreneurs, to be in some kind of peer mastermind where you intentionally create that with the other people. Don't just throw it out there casually.
I know. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? You do a poor job, you learn something, you get out there and you try again. That's what I
You
like to tell
fall on your
people too.
face.
We
That's a
all do
good
it. It
point. Like,
happens.
it doesn't always work out. I'm not ever saying it's going to work out.
Something else I was reading about in regards to you is that you've had a number of bad relationships before ultimately landing on a really great relationship, right? What is some advice for those out there listening who are struggling with those personal relationships?
Oh, girl, how much time do you have?
Lots.
It's so interesting, like how widespread and common this is. I joined TikTok a couple of months ago, and I've been posting just for context about my former relationships, and the people are coming out in droves to comment and say like, "Oh my gosh, me too." Just and I don't mean to speak lightly of it. I mean, there
No.
was emotional abuse, and it was bad there for a while. Um, so do you want advice for people who are in it, or for people who are like kind of keep finding themselves?
I think for those people that keep finding themselves in similar situations all the
I
time.
personally had to get to a place, my own rock bottom, where I looked around at my life. You know, I was 31. I had two failed back-to-back terrible relationships. All I wanted to do was like settle down and have kids. I was done partying and all of that point in my life. And deep down, I knew I was a good, solid person. Like I was
Yeah.
kind and generous and all these things. And so I thought to myself, what is the common denominator in all of this? And the common denominator was me. And for a
Right.
long time, I was so caught up in how my partners could change. Like if you would only do X, Y, and Z, then we would both be happy,
Right.
which isn't entirely untrue. Like they definitely had some things to change,
Only
but
we
so
could
did
wave
I.
a magic wand, right? Something.
Right. But I had to take responsibility for so many things. And this is not, again, not to put all of the blame on me, but I was tolerating horrible behavior. I was ignoring my intuition that told me, don't marry your first husband, that I ignored, that told me on the first date with an ex boyfriend, something's up here,
Yeah.
which I ignored. And it turned out to be a disaster. I was just settling for this really poor behavior. And I thought to myself, like, there's something underneath this, that why I'm attracting these types of relationships, not only attracting them, but staying in them when I know it wasn't, when I knew it wasn't good. So that's really when I went to Codependence Anonymous, which is a 12-step program for people who are codependent.
Yes.
I jumped into learning about love addiction, which my therapist told me I was. And at first I was like, no, I'm not. Turns out she was right. And started reading books on it and just really dove into what I should have done in the first place. And that was working on myself and my family of origin stuff, my attachment style, which is really interesting, why we show up the way we do in relationships. And not so I can like magically fix myself, more so I can have these conversations with my now partner, and
Right.
and also like take responsibility if I react a certain way and get triggered, that I can say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry that I behaved like that. I was totally triggered. It didn't really have anything to do with you. Sorry, I was an a-hole. And then we just move forward. Like it's so like honestly, Charlene, it's like it's almost bizarre being in such a mature and healthy relationship. I'm like, who are we?
It's great. Good for
All
you.
grown up.
That is amazing, and I'm glad you worked through all that. And I think that's great advice for other people out there. I know sometimes we see the red flags, but it's not until they're smacking us directly in the face that we take
Exactly.
action. So good for you for figuring that out, and I think that's useful for others that might find themselves in sort of similar patterns, in situations.
Yeah, I
Oh,
hope so.
I hope so too. Also, something that happens, I know, with entrepreneurs is sometimes they are victims to self sabotage. They're kind of thwarting their own success, whether that's professionally, personally. What are your thoughts on self sabotage?
Well, I think there can be many reasons for it. I think it can also be really helpful to journal about it or work with a coach, work with a therapist as to why you keep finding yourself in that place. One book that I recommend to most of my clients, which I have right here, and it's not mine, is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. It's a fairly short read. I find it extremely helpful. He talks about upper limit problems, which is essentially self-sabotaging. And I think, and I'm thinking of women because I mostly work with them. This is just the thing that popped up for me. Again, there's could be many reasons. Sometimes it's the fear of success.
Yeah.
It's the fear of leveling up so much to the point where we might have to sustain something. And maybe work-life balance is incredibly hard. Maybe,
Yes.
she's a working mom. We are worried that we actually have to work on our own stuff, the more, because any entrepreneur will tell you the more success that they have, the more personal work they have to do.
Yes.
And that can scare us.
Yes.
And I'm also speaking from personal experience.
Yes.
Here's why I
We've all been
self-sabotage.
there.
Exactly. But I also feel that many times there's some kind of, maybe all the time, there's some kind of secondary gain that we're getting from self-sabotaging.
Yes.
So figuring out what that is, like, what are you getting out of limiting yourself? It's something like consciously it may not serve us, but unconsciously it is. Typically it's that we're staying in our comfort zone, that we don't have to talk about something that's really hard. There's some kind of secondary gain. So if you find out what that is, a lot of times that points to the thing that you need to work on.
Absolutely. And you also talk about knowing what you really want, right? Is that easier said than done, would you say?
Totally. I learned this early on in my career. I think it was in like a vision board workshop or something I was doing like in my first year of coaching. And I was asking women, we were doing this visualization, like, getting them all centered and woo woo and asking them, what do you want more than anything? And several of them said after the visualization that they didn't know. And they were almost sheepish as they asked me and feeling a little bit embarrassed. So that was a huge signal to me that it was something I needed to dig into. And what is this? And again, this goes back to our conditioning of women typically put themselves last, like their needs and desires and goals many times are not a priority.
Yes.
So instead, I ask the question, what do you want less of in your life? What do you not want anymore? And people can definitely give you a list of the things that they're mad at, the things they don't want anymore, the things that stress them out, the things if they could wave a magic wand, they could make disappear.
Yes.
So if you start there, that will typically point you in the direction of what you want.
That is a good jumping off point. And then you also talk about once you know what you want, you have to ask for it. What are some tips on asking for what you want and communicating about it?
I think for women, asking for what you want, that leap can feel like we're suddenly opportunistic.
Yes.
Which those are two very different things. But when you're so used to not asking for what you want, to ask for what you want can feel like a massive, it's like going from A to Z.
Right.
And so I just want to acknowledge that. And part of it starts with learning how to ask, like the communication skills that it takes. Because it's not about being aggressive or, putting your finger in someone's face or demanding, which some women are stereotyped as that.
Yes.
But it's about what if you reframed it and made it a request? And like start with looking at the things that you're not asking for. Are you not asking for the sale? Are you not sending out offers to your email list? Are you not asking for a more balanced level of chores with your partner around the house? Are you not sending your meal back at a restaurant?
That is really excellent advice. And, I had a customer early on that told me, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I've always used that as a mantra because sometimes I get nervous, like, should I ask? I don't want to bother. We do all those little games with ourselves. So you have to ask to get what you want, otherwise it will never happen. Something else that I noticed that you like to talk and speak about is shining too bright. Talk more about that.
Yeah, it's shining too bright. And the reason that I say it that way instead of just shining bright is because, like, of course I want to, push the envelope a little bit for people, but I actually did a podcast episode several years ago that got a lot of attention from my community. And they were like, yes, I resonated so much with this, is not only the concept of shining too bright, but also of outshining others. And, like you were just saying, for women, we get so uncomfortable and like kind of do this dance of, I don't want to make Charlene feel bad. I don't want to, there's sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's a person in our circle, whether it's a family member or friend or sibling or parent or somebody, who we make up a story that if I grow to my full accomplishments, to my full ambition, all my success, then I will outshine so-and-so and make them feel badly about themselves or make them look bad in front of others. And I don't want to do that. And I have felt this about certain people, and especially someone like me with a big personality who's been told to tone it down. I'm making other people uncomfortable. I'm intimidating. I especially feel that and don't want to make other people uncomfortable. So it dims our light and we stay as small as possible to not garner too much attention. And so I invite people to shine too bright just as an invitation to go one level up from where you're at, because you may be very dim at the moment. And that's okay. That's where you are. There's nothing wrong with that. You got to start somewhere, and I'm going to meet you where you are. So what does shining a little bit brighter look like? Maybe it's having that conversation with your partner. Maybe it's sending a meal back or asking for sending out more offers to your community, whatever it is. That's what I want people to just be aware of, what's going on.
That is awesome. Yes, I think some people don't realize their power and they're kind of afraid, as you're saying, so they need to kind of push it a little more. I love that analogy. Can you tell us more about the new book you have coming out?
Yeah, well, you've touched on several of the topics. It's called Make Some Noise, Speak Your Mind and Own Your Strength, which is, if you're watching us on video, it's behind me. And I wrote it because it's my third book, and I felt like I could not write another women's empowerment book without talking about the culture that raised us. I'm obsessed with getting to the root of the problem. I'm like, let's just figure out how to solve this problem from the root, so we're not like slapping Band-Aids on things. And my last book was centered somewhat around shame and how we show up and trying to avoid it. And then I thought that was, getting to the root of the problem. What I learned even further is that it's largely for women. It's largely the culture that raised us that tells us to dim our light. There was a Pew Research Center did a study in 2016, and they asked Americans, what are the traits that we value the most in men and in women? And what traits do we not value in men and women? The outcome was so interesting. Like, you would have thought that this was done in 1950, but I'll give you the short version. There was a lot of words that it's fascinating and super easy to read too. You can just go to Pew Research Center and look it up. But the word powerful was rated 67% positive on the positive spectrum for men and 92% negative for women.
Yes.
And I saw that research, and I'll tell you what, I was so disappointed.
It is disappointing when you look at all that stuff, for sure.
Because self-confidence is directly correlated to being powerful, and made me realize even more that I need to keep talking about this and write this book about it, because women's empowerment, in my opinion, is an act of rebellion. We are pushing up against societal norms and cultural expectations.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds like such a wonderful book and resource for everyone. So I hope that you will all check it out. I know that it's a great book for you and you'll enjoy it and get a lot from it that you can use in your life, both personally and professionally. I am going to switch it up a little bit here. I like to play a fun game. It's called If You Tell Me Yours, I'll Tell You Mine.
Okay.
So I am going to ask you a few questions. The first one is, if you could live in any sitcom, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, I can only pick one.
One, I guess, for now.
Probably The Office.
Oh, I love The Office. Yes, that would be fun to live in The Office, for sure.
Yeah. What is yours?
Such amazing characters. Well, I was thinking anything that doesn't have zombies in it. Like, I could never be in one of those zombie shows because it's exhausting just running and trying to get away from the zombies. But I would pick probably Friends. Friends seems like a fun one to live in for a little while, don't you think?
That was came to mind as well. But do you know that I have like a legitimate phobia of zombies?
Do you really? No, I didn't know that.
I can't even watch the trailer for The Walking Dead. Like, it just even just talking about it makes the hair stand up.
There's one called Black Summer out now that's on Netflix, and I watch it every once in a while, and I tell you, it's exhausting to watch it. They're just running the entire time. It's like terrible. Okay, next question. What's in the trunk of your car?
I'm actually really organized.
Oh,
I have a Highlander, so it's sort of just the back. I have a Mexican blanket and like another fleece blanket that rolls up because you never know when you're going to need one. Like
Yes,
I do.
whether someone's going to be cold or someone needs like a place to sit.
that's great.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of you. I throw everything in there. It's like a storage unit. But right now I also have a couple blankets for the beach. I have all my beach supplies, stuff we need for whitewater rafting and ice skating. So I feel like I'm just throwing in there in case I need. I have sunscreen too, which is practical. Next
Which, yeah, we
question.
always
Would you rather hit the treadmill or the couch?
The treadmill.
Treadmill. That's good.
Yeah.
Exercise is so important, to our mental health and well-being and just, staying
100%.
active. I like to hit the treadmill, and I do. I have a rowing machine actually, but sometimes I like to hit the couch first and work my way up to the treadmill.
If I don't work out in the morning, I likely won't do it, even if I have the best intentions. And even if I put it in my calendar, come like 5, 6 o'clock, all I want to do is hit the couch. So I have a Peloton bike and that's what I do.
Oh, very cool. If you could have a theme song right now, what would it be?
This question is so hard for me because I like so much music. Really anything by Florence and the Machine. I think because Florence Welch, her lyrics are so moving to me. Like every time I've been through a really hard transition in my life, when my dad passed away, when I got sober, I would turn to her music obsessively, and all of it means a lot to me. So I'm going to go with anything by her.
That's very cool. Right now, the one I've been playing all the time, much to the horror of my teens, is Kings and Queens by Ava Max. I love that song. It's such a power song.
Okay.
So if I
I
had,
thought you were going to say something by Lizzo or like Megan Thee Stallion or something.
but anything powerful right now, I like it. A last question. Would you rather have a pause or rewind button in your life?
Definitely a pause.
A pause, really?
Well,
I think both would be interesting, but pause because I love all the wisdom that I have right now. And my kids are 13 and 11. And I just realized, like, do I only have like 4 or 5 summers left with my son until he's 18? And it just is mind blowing.
I agree. My kids are 13 and 16 right now, and I just feel like it's flying by. The time is running out, and a pause button would be great. I also like the rewind option to go back and fix a couple things. But hey, I think fast forward would probably, I'm always kind of moving ahead, so maybe fast forward would be.
the way
I would like the rewind to be able to just like hold like their chubby 6-month-old baby bodies. Like that's like my favorite age, that infant stage.
I love that. Around like 1 year, 18 months when they're so sweet before they hit terrible twos. That's a really good time too. Okay, we're coming to the end of the show here and we're done with our game. Andrea, where can the audience find out more about you and connect with you?
Probably right now, the best place where they can get the most free stuff is andreaowen.com/noise. And, they can grab a copy of the book there, and we're doing lots of free things. So there's a free workbook to download for anybody who actually likes to do the work when they read personal empowerment books, as well as a free book club that starts in September and other stuff that they can see on that page.
So many great resources. So everyone be sure to check it out. And until then, we will see you next time on Launch.